It doesn't normally come up with that wording. Am I assuming the third party is YouTube? But
it looks, yeah, looks okay now.
It doesn't normally come up with that wording.
Oh.
Am I assuming the third party is YouTube? But that's a severe delay.
Yeah, looks okay now.
It doesn't normally come up with that wording.
Oh.
I'm assuming the third party is YouTube. That's a severe delay. That's a severe delay.
Okay. I'll try.
Are we saying we're live? Are we live?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along tonight. Sorry about the technical errors even at the beginning there. I've received no apologies for absence, and the minutes of the meeting on the 7th of November and the 20th of January, can I sign them as a true and accurate record? Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody. So we move on to item 3, which is the elective home education update. And I've received no apologies. And I welcome Kevin, but Democratic Services, I can't have this feedback.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, you can hear the feedback as well. Others on it can.
Yeah, I'm also hearing lots of feedback.
Should everyone mute themselves, Scott? Would that help?
To be fair, Philip, I think everybody is muted apart from myself and Democratic Services. Okay, let's carry on and just see what happens, and then if not, we'll have to abort the process, I guess. But Kevin, welcome, Kevin, anyway, to talk to us about elective home education.
Hi, thank you very much. I think it's not that long ago since I came and gave a written update. So I think tonight is just, I think you asked me back to do a further verbal update. So that's what I'm going to do today. So just to kind of refresh and run through, obviously the pattern for elective home education in North Northants has been that we've had a significant growth. So in April 2021, we had approximately 650 children and young people electively home educated, and our data release from 2nd Feb was 1,134. And if I had the graph and I put that down, you can pretty much imagine what that looks like. Obviously, elective home education, I think there's always been a demand for that. There are certain parents and families who philosophically prefer to electively home educate their children. There's always been a run, but obviously what we've got now is a significant rise, and probably a rise which is out of an order of magnitude out of what we would normally expect in terms of the kind of the ups and downs of the average. We collect quite a lot of data on that as we track it every month, and the single biggest reason is usually down to sort of mental health reasons. If you ask parents, there's quite a bit in there, sometimes subsets around bullying and things like that, but mental health has become the biggest single factor. So what we've tried to do is begin to look systematically at what's causing that. I mean, the team I look after, the EIPT team, the sort of Education Inclusion Partnership team, we are the part of the local authority that's responsible for doing the processing of our statutory duties around EHE. So we receive notifications from school when parents request an EHE, and then we undertake the checks that are required of us in terms of the home education plan and approving that. But obviously under Section 19, we only have fairly limited duties in sense of assuring ourselves that a sufficient and suitable education is being provided, and the home education plan only has to demonstrate that. It's not a particularly prescriptive thing. We can't be too prescriptive about the curriculum or how it's taught, but it's just meeting that bar, and it's not a particularly high bar. So I think the vast majority of them are approved. Once they've been approved, then our statutory obligation is to undertake a review once every year, unless there is a particular reason why we would need to intervene before, and that would usually come from something probably from one of the other services. So like with all things in systems, if you get big changes, you've got to try. We're trying to understand, what's the we know the what, it's the why. Why might this be happening? So to try and get into that, we've had colleagues from Safeguarding Education who just recently did a bit of survey work. They spoke to 10 schools and they spoke to a number of parents, trying to understand what were the causes and what were the reasons for that. And on top of that, we've identified the 5 top secondary schools, 5 top primary schools in terms of EHE, and myself and a couple of colleagues have begun to go out and actually sit down in front of head teachers and senior leadership teams and talk to them about that. And again, the pattern around, there's a couple of things. I think the pattern around mental health is definitely there. So when I was speaking to a school, they talked a lot about how pupils may have sort of very low level mental health needs. Schools these days have quite a lot of interventions for that, CBD, counselling, all sorts of different interventions that they offer. But they can't necessarily meet all those needs. And then those pupils probably don't have a mental health need which is acute enough to meet threshold for a service like the hospital outreach education service. So what tends to happen, it's not the only reason, but it's possibly one of the reasons, is that these then there isn't often a lot of medical evidence that would sustain mental health as being a reason for not being in school. So then what happens is the lack of attendance becomes an attendance issue sometimes. And once it becomes an attendance issue, parents might then choose to electively home educate their children rather than have to deal with what is an attendance issue. I think what we're beginning to realise is that it's part of that group, and why that's the case, it's probably something to do with a bit of a legacy and hangover from probably what happened during the pandemic, and there's probably lots of other reasons, but it is something around that is driving the variance above the norm. And I think from our point of view, what we're going to have to do is look at what intervention we can put in there in partnership with schools. And that's partly about, maybe there was also some interesting stuff that came out of the survey around parents not necessarily fully understanding what was involved in elective home education and what the commitment was. One school sort of reported that some parents were just asking that could they have their children taught online at home because that's what they did during the pandemic. But obviously that isn't possible. That's not what a school can offer. There are ways that can be done temporarily to mitigate certain attendance issues, but it is not part of the standard offer of a school. So I think there's a bit of work with parents about understanding what's involved in elective home education. There's probably a bit of work for us in terms of those pupils who may want to come back into school, and making sure that we can support better back in. But what's coming out of some of the initial work we've done is this piece around how can we, in partnership with schools, support those pupils who have this particularly low level mental health need where they might just choose to then opt out of school and electively home educate. And certainly in terms of a lot of the work that's going on in the local authority around the whole transformation agenda and Sharice's agenda around moving our interventions. The service I run and oversee is pretty much we process the statutory process. We have very little upstream in terms of interventions with the school. And I think what Sharice is really focused on is how can we retask some of our resource to put it further upstream in school so that we can begin to kind of intervene earlier, so that not as many pupils want to and not as many families choose to go down the elective home ed route. And that team around the school approach, I think, crosses over not only to EHE, but also to issues around permanent exclusion and all the other issues around attendance. So I think there is a plan to have a whole strategy around EHE. I think there's a working group being put together, and that will involve us and then partners from schools and other agencies probably, to then look at what interventions we can put in place into that piece between when attendance becomes an issue, when mental health becomes a low level issue, to when it leads either into elective home education and or to some sort of permanent exclusion, a period where basically this child, for whatever reason, can't or doesn't want to attend their local school. So I think, in summary, from where we are, that's pretty much the direction of travel. I think we're pretty clear. We've got a lot of data around the what that gets reported pretty frequently. We've done initial work around the why. I think with this one, we've really got to talk to teachers. We've really got to talk to families to understand the journey of these pupils through into school and why they come out of school at quite a granular level. And because if we understand that, then we will begin to understand how we can devise something that's going to help. And that's the next step. So that's my kind of summary of where we are.
Kevin, thank you very much for that. And I think you're absolutely right about early intervention, and early intervention is key all across children's services, isn't it? And we've talked a lot about that in various different arenas as well. And if we can identify issues within schools to stop that child being taken out of school to be electively home educated because of that reason, then that's the best thing for that. Are we experiencing a number of children being taken out but then want to go back into a school because, like you commented, said that perhaps parents or carers didn't fully understand what elective home education was, they didn't realise the commitment around it? Are we experiencing vast amounts of numbers trying to get back in to school and maybe there not being a school place in their school of choice?
I don't think we're having vast numbers. It's certainly not a big issue. There are issues with pupils who are electively home educated who want to get back into school, and then there is a insufficient school place, and that's about our sort of mainstream sufficiency particularly, and that issue does crop up. But I don't think it's a particularly significant issue in this cohort. We haven't got large numbers coming back routinely saying, I've changed my mind, I want to go back into school. But it does happen, and I guess the sufficiency issues do create challenges in that, because obviously they come back, they won't necessarily have had to get back into the school that they were originally in, and then the overall sufficiency issues around place in secondary in particular then creates a difficulty around being able to offer that child a place which is suitable and often which parents want. But it's in terms of EHE, we're not getting vast amounts of changing their minds, I don't think.
Thank you, Kevin. And just one final thing before I go over to some other members is that we talk a lot about the voice of the child, and absolutely the voice of the child is important. During these conversations, do we talk to the children as well, or is it just the parents and carers and teachers?
I think in terms of this piece of work, it's very much going to be about talking to the children as well. I think we have quite a lot of dialogue. We have a whole piece around engagement with children and young people, whether we're doing any kind of policy work or research work around practice. So yes, I think in terms of what we might devise, talking to children and young people is absolutely going to be part of what we want to do.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kevin. Lee, please.
Thanks, Scott. Actually, you asked my first question, but there was an extra bit which was about people returning, students returning back, because I can certainly imagine that parents decide to home educate and then think, crikey, this is hard work. And then I wonder if when they come back into mainstream education, if they're at the level that they needed to be, because I can imagine if they're away from the mainstream for a while, then of course they're not following they're not getting the same level of education, I wouldn't think. And so I was wondering if that was happening. And then we talked about those numbers, 650 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And 40%, not far off a doubling, really. Kevin, is it plateauing? So are we seeing that was pandemic level rises, or has it become, I was going to use the word trendy, and clearly that's not the right word, but is there a trend to it? Because I would imagine the more pupils that are home educated, the more of their friends see that somebody else they know is home educated, and it must seem attractive to some, I guess, naively. Are we seeing it leveling, or?
I'd like to say yes. There's been, in the data, if you look at the numbers, it's gone up in waves, and then it kind of flattens off for a bit, and then it goes up again. And we've had, from 21, we've had probably 1, 2, 3 of those, and then we had a drop again in kind of the early part of 24, and the last 6 months again we've had another steady rise. So the gradient isn't, I wouldn't say, probably as steep as it was. But if you wanted me to describe the pattern, I can share this with you afterwards. It's kind of doing that, but it's certainly not flat. The graph, I think I may have shared it last time. It's not a flattening, plateauing kind of. We didn't get a post-pandemic spurt and then it kind of flattened off. We continue to see phases where it's going up. And if you went back to your kind of GCSE O level, you'd put your straight line through it. I did GCEs because I'm too old, but you put your straight line through it. It is it's a nice straight line, probably still up in a statistical sense. And I guess some flattening off in the rate of change, but still upwards. Hence why, Sharice's priority around this is very high. We've got a whole strategy piece. We've done some work with safeguarding. I'm out talking to schools, which is going to bring all of that together, and then it wraps into the whole transformation agenda and getting our resource upstream into schools to try and do the kind of work in the middle between low level mental health attendance needs, EHE, PECs. All of these things kind of get wrapped in together, and somehow or another we need to find a way of doing that. And I think that will, now that we understand what's causing it, that will definitely have an impact.
Okay, thanks.
And going back to your point about attainment, I think there is an issue with that as well. And I think that's a good point, because I think if you are out of a mainstream setting, yes, you're probably you are certainly having an education which meets the statutory thresholds, but in terms of curriculum wise, you possibly aren't covering everything. So if you do want to jump back in, then there'll be an attainment gap. And I think that might be another piece that we probably need to look at, in terms of what support can we offer for parents who come back 2 years later and say, as you said, crikey, actually this we've decided this isn't for us, but how is our child going to fit back into their year group when they've potentially missed, not maybe across the board, but in certain subject areas, there's an attainment gap between where they would be academically and for their year group and where they actually are. And I think that's another piece that we need to look at.
Yeah, and sorry, Chair, if I can just come back on that. So, and Kevin, I suppose that's what I'm thinking. It's almost educating parents. Crikey, it's difficult to do it without it, without being patronising. But you can imagine parents taking a child out of school because the child is struggling.
Yeah.
But actually, potentially, they've created a situation where the child can never go back. Whenever they go back, the child's in an even more difficult position, because they've got to try and fit back in to a peer group where they've fallen further behind. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and that came out of the work that Safeguarding and Education did in terms of their report, because they spoke to quite a number of parents, and I think, and also from the conversations I've had with school head teachers and senior leadership teams, I think they all say, parents do it often for the best will in the world, because they often feel their children are struggling, but they don't necessarily have a full and complete picture of what it entails. And if we can maybe do some work there more comprehensively, not to say, crikey, don't do this, because it's going to be really difficult, but to just show them the reality of what this means, and the not the irreversibleness of the decision, but the impact of the decision beyond, if your child is coming home from school every week, deeply upset, traumatized, not thriving, and you as a parent, I'm a parent, you would be saying, crikey, in the absence of an alternative, I'm going to take my child out. But it's trying to work with them to get them to understand that there's a lot involved in that decision, and it has lots and lots of impacts now and in the future, and maybe that would help as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Jean, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kevin, again. I think you've answered one of my questions, which was around mental health and whether that was diagnosed mental health or people not using it as an excuse. I don't mean that, but it's that low level, as you say, mental health problems that so just want to move on to that. When you're talking about monitoring, you're saying that they need monitoring within 12 months. Is that up to date, or are we on a catch-up situation there?
No, I'm pretty confident. I haven't got the data in front of me, but we have a pretty tight process for that. As soon as plans are agreed, those monitoring visits are put in, and we have a whole team that and Capital One and the system just drives that for us and reminds us and produces a process for us. So I think in terms of picking up and reviewing home education plans on an annual basis as per our statutory duty, I'm reasonably confident to sit here and say that we do that pretty robustly.
Thank you.
John, please.
Sorry, thank you very much. Okay, my question's quite straightforward. Do we know the highest age group percentage-wise that is home educated?
We probably do. It's whether I can find it whilst we're talking. I have a report that Performance produced for me. Let me have a look. The total is Key Stage 4.
Sorry, say that again. Sorry.
Key Stage 4.
Key Stage 4.
Key Stage 4 is 36.9%, and Key Stage 3 is 34.9%. That's on kind of the data that we were given on the 3rd of February. So yeah, there's a significant, Key Stage 2 is 19%. So probably what we got, 70% of the total is in Key Stage 3 and 4.
So are we aiming at that age group to try? Okay.
Yeah. That's why a lot of the conversations with secondary schools, and I think some of the secondary schools were, they're not blaming anyone, but they're saying that sometimes these low level problems begin in primary. That's so again, I think why we do need to work with primary, and that some of the low level attendance problems start in primary, and then they become slightly chronic. And that's not a judgment or a blame for anyone. It's just and then by the time they get to secondary, the secondary schools find it very difficult to undo that. And then in spite of, I think secondary schools, because of their size, have a lot more resource and a lot more in terms of offer for pupils who have all sorts of challenges in and around school, because they're big schools and they have counselling and they have CVD and they have outreach, and they've got big staff teams and to some degree big resources, although they probably wouldn't thank me for saying that, but that to some degree that's true. The offer now is quite substantial in a lot of our schools. Obviously in a small primary school that's not always the case. So maybe this, again, what's coming out of the conversations is maybe something about trying to identify those who are maybe struggling with a chronic attendance issue prior to transfer, and then again maybe trying to do something there, because as soon as they transfer, that tends to be the group where EHE becomes an attendance becomes an issue.
Okay, just last question on that. Is it a mix of girls and boys, or are we finding one the males are more percentage wise, or the girls?
Let me have a look. I'll try and find that if I can. Have I got that by gender? It's on a report somewhere, but I can't actually find it. No, I'm sorry, I can't. I just can't.
That's not a problem. Come back to me when you can.
Come back to you. Yeah, I've
All
got
right.
I've got a 3-page report with lots of data, and it's in there somewhere. But I'll probably hold you up trying to
No
find it.
worries. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Reese, did you want to just come in there?
Yeah, I've got the report here. It's 571 females and 540
Brilliant.
males.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've got all my data reports in one archive.
Thanks, Sharice. I've got it open. I'm scrolling
All right.
madly, but not finding it.
That's okay.
Perfect, thank you. And Kevin, just to go back to actually a point that you raised, actually, and I never thought of it like this, but perhaps if a child attends a fairly small rural school, and then goes to a multi-academy trust, like you say, the overwhelming possibilities of fear and things is there, isn't it? If you're going from a school with 40 children and then you're going one with 2,000 children, it's the fear there, and I could understand the mental health issues that come into effect within that as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think transition from, I remember my children transitioning, and then the school saying that the biggest fear for children transitioning is bigger kids. All of a sudden, they're in an environment surrounded by 1,200 pupils, many of whom are the size of adults, and a lot of these pupils may have come from quite small, potentially rural environments, and so the challenge is not unsubstantial. So again, it's all about, I think the trick to this is all about identifying the whys. There's a thing of 5 why thing, isn't it? There's lots of little whys all sitting around this: mental health, transition, back to school, early intervention, better information. And we're beginning to sort of sketch out very clearly what the whys are. And once we know those, then part of the strategy is we can then put something in place against each one of those to hopefully have a mitigating effect on the numbers.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kevin, for that presentation. And I know that Sharice and the team is on it, literally, and are doing amazing work within that, identifying it first of all, looking at the problems and then the solutions, and then actually getting into the schools as well, which is really positive steps moving forward. And I know sometimes it feels like a slow process, but there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
So we move on to item 4, which is the Educational Health and Care Plans update. Welcome, Troy.
Is he in?
Hello, thank you, Councillor. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm very unfamiliar with Zoom. I think it's only my second Zoom call, and it had a lot of difficulty letting me in. I think it needed to do an update, but I'm glad I'm here. Hello, I'm Troy Hobbs. I'm the interim head of SEND, having been here along with Kevin just before Christmas. I'm going to attempt to show you some slides. I've just got half a dozen slides. I think the complexity of the data warrants putting a few graphs in front of you rather than just trying to give you a narrative. Forgive me, I'm looking for the button that says share, present. Oh, there, right in the middle, forgive me. Let's get that going. I believe it's this one. And Sharice or somebody, could you let me know when that's presenting, please?
It looks like it's coming up. Yeah, there we go.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
You've got lift off.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, so there's quite an interesting story here with our number of education, health and care plans, which has grown dramatically in a very short period of time. Just before 2021, there were around about 2,000 EHCPs. at January this year, we had over 4,600, education, health and care plans. And I should just say, this is a statutory plan which sets out a child's special educational needs and the additional and different special educational provision that the local authority must secure for that child. So it's a complex picture as to why we're receiving so many requests and why we're growing at that fast pace. I think it might be interesting to take some local views on that. But it does seem related to that timing relates obviously to the inception of Northants as a unitary authority. So the EHC service is receiving now routinely over 100 EHC needs assessment requests each month, and also whilst the parents may make requests for assessments as well, and that's increasing to slightly higher than national averages. The legal threshold for carrying out an assessment is very low. It only describes that a child may have special educational needs that requires special educational provision to be made in a plan. And so it's incredibly difficult for local authorities to resist that. There's a lot of expectation in the legislation, the regulation, the codes of practice that we expect mainstream education settings and schools and nurseries and colleges to be drawing on their own resources, for which they have dedicated resources to meet children and young people's SEND, special educational needs and disability, before requesting a statutory assessment and before receiving a plan. But if the test is that a child only may have special educational needs and a request is received, in my experience, the tribunal, the national tribunal, which considers requests where it's been declined, is a very low threshold tribunal as well, and very minded to encourage local authorities to undertake those assessments. So with all of that rapid growth, Northants is now broadly in line with the national average for the size of the population with EHCPs, but there is no indication of reducing demand. Just that last point there, the highest prevalences of the types of SEND are exactly in line with the national emerging picture. Huge increases in the numbers of children and young people being diagnosed with autism, but if you don't have a diagnosis, we call those communication and interaction issues, and that's another category which we record in education, health and care plans. As Kevin was talking about his cohort of children and young people that he works with, significant increases in instances of social, emotional and mental health needs around children and young people. We used to talk more about young people, but I think we're seeing that now in children much more prevalently. Speech, language, communication needs also, and to a lesser degree, cognition and learning needs. So that's a sort of quick picture on where we are with demand. This slide with lots of pretty colours shows you the picture over the last 10 years, and I think it's good that it goes back for 10 years, because in 2014 was where the current legislation for SEND, which we're working within, called the Children and Families Act, was let loose on us all in 2014. And before then we had a slightly different but not dissimilar system. But one of the things that we did have as professionals working with children and young people with SEND was longer time to do the work around assessing their needs and making plans. What this chart shows, and you'll want to look at particularly the purple line, is that's the Northamptonshire before the unitary authorities were created. You can see that Northamptonshire maintained a steady state for many of those years, but its timeliness of EHCPs being issued on time started to fall around 2018, 2019, and then fall dramatically in the next year. The local authorities were incepted in 2021, and you can see for Northamptonshire, North Northamptonshire, we have generally improved dramatically our timeliness, to the extent their EHCP timeliness was above most similar authorities, and in fact at some points significantly above the national average. And the national average in 2023 for issuing a plan on time was just over 50%. So that was a good news story, but performance dipped significantly also again in 2024. And I think those were matters that were related to, or not necessarily caused by, but certainly related to the turnover in senior leadership, staffing, instability within the EHC service, an undersized team to the increase in demand that there's been, for example. So it was, quite a challenging period. But since September 2024, and Sharice's appointment, we have focused very much on this area of work. And one of the things that was instigated prior to me joining anyway was a focused activity between all of the agencies that provide advice for statutory assessment. And that's overall, that's a 20-week process. And you have sort of, chunks of time to do certain activity. When we've agreed to carry out an assessment and we've asked professionals such as educational psychologists and others to give us advice, they must get their advice to us by week 12 of that 20-week process. And so at week 10, we all now come together on a weekly meeting, and we test, challenge and support one another across education, health and care to ensure that that advice is on its way, that it's coming in, that it might already have been received, or if it's forecast to be late. And then if it is forecast to be late, to understand the reasons for that, and to do what we can as a collective to support and enable that advice to come in on time. That is absolutely critical that we receive that advice, because the remaining time of those 20 weeks 13 to 20, there's a lot of activity compressed in there that we need to get on with, including writing the plan and publishing it. It's very, very compressed. So if that advice is late, it affects everything else. As a result of that 10-week advices panel, timeliness of advice has significantly improved, and that then has contributed to EHCPs being issued more on time. So this chart shows you a period going back to February 2024. And what you can see there is that the green line is EHC plans that were due to be issued in that month that were issued on time. And so the bars show you the number of plans that were due to be issued, and the green line is how many of those got out. And what you can see there most obviously is that dip in performance around August, September, when that there were particular challenges on the EHC service, as we've talked about. But since September, there's been an absolute concerted focus on timeliness at all levels of staffing within the EHC service, driven by high expectation by senior leadership team and underpinned with support from directors. And our really good news story there is in the month of January this year, what we were able to achieve there was 95% of all EHCPs due that month going out on time. Okay, it was a small number, but it was a further improvement on the previous month in December, notwithstanding Christmas leave and all of those things. The EHC service still managed to get nearly 2/3 of all plans that were due out on time in that period. And there's also a compression of activity at this particular time of year, which is something called phase transfer, when children move from one phase of education to another. And that's at exactly the point where we're undertaking consultation activity with schools around moving several hundred of children from one phase to another and preparing all of their plans. So it was a fantastic effort, sustained effort from the EHC service, and we really did celebrate them for that. And what's more, that effort, it looks like it's being sustained. So with the activity around the 10-week advices panel, high expectation at all levels across all of the services that participate in the statutory process, excellent leadership from the EHC service manager and support to her. The EHC team service is doing particularly well, and we look forward to continuing that trajectory. Last slide is it's all well and good sort of, knocking these things out of the door, but actually what about the quality? And I think this is the $1 million question really, because who is an EHCP for? Whose plan is it really? Is it the child's plan? Is it the parents' plan? Is it the schools? Is it the professionals? Everybody's got a stake in this, and they want their pound of flesh. But I think really what I can say here is that there is a concerted effort now about moving on from timeliness. We've got that. We know what we need to do, and we're getting on with it. And now looking at, so what do those plans mean for those children and young people? So we have implemented a quality assurance tool, which we have looked at a number from other local authorities, and Plump for one, which is giving us a framework to test both the legality, but the readability, the succinctness, the quality, the person-centeredness of those EHC plans. And that is already paying dividends. It's no better thing in SEND than having positive parent feedback. And when we've got our Northants Parent Carer Forum reporting to us that parents are starting to see and believe in the quality of our education, health and care plans, I'll take that every day. And that's just exactly what they're reporting. Parents are reporting that their plans feel like they're reporting on their children. They feel like they've got the right needs described. They're positive about the special educational provision that they're seeing described in those plans. So if we can just keep those two things going at the same time, quality and timeliness, I think that would do a lot to give confidence to our families of children and young people with vulnerabilities and additional needs. So we've got a variety of tools. We're using a tool called Envision 360, which is a tool that multiple local authorities use, and it's a quality assurance checking tool that we're using within the EHC service, but also now we are starting to embark on drawing in our partners across education, health and social care. And we will be dip sampling several hundred education, health and care plans each year to ensure that we're sustaining that quality and that person-centered approach in those plans. And looping back the learning from all of those agencies to ensure that the quality of advice leads to good quality person-centered plans, that we can see a clear read across between a child's needs, the recommended provision, and importantly, the outcomes that we're striving for them to achieve. So all of our partner agencies will be participating in this. Everybody signed up to it. We really look forward to getting on with that work across the course of this year. So I hope that gives you a quick overview of both an improving picture on timeliness of EHCPs, but also our intentions and our work to sustain the quality of our EHCPs in Northants. I'm going to see if I can stop sharing. Hopefully that's the right button.
Troy, thank you very much, and I guess first of all, it's a huge thank you and well done to the whole team that have achieved this. And when you're at a really low point, and I think it was 4%, wasn't it? At one stage we were, that's extremely low, extremely worrying, concerning for the parents and the children. That actually to be able to get that back up and work on it and work on it and work on it, to get positive response from the parents, it is really good, because you hear a lot of negative comments all the while about various different things, so it's always good to get positive comments within that, and the quality, and I'm really pleased, Troy, that you mentioned about the quality, because there are times when you could quite easily just rush things through, write things, copy and paste things through, and actually the quality isn't there. So I'm really pleased that the team are putting in that mechanism to be able to check thoroughly. And I know we do it with the Children's Trust, don't we, Charisse, with different parts of that for the social workers. To be able to do that is absolutely the right thing. I mean, I know you're not going to check every one of them, because that's probably just going double work, isn't it? But to be able to do that is absolutely the right thing. And no, so it's well done to that team, considering the volumes as well, the volumes that are coming through, and we know that there are peak times throughout the year where there will be a lot higher than some other times. Jean, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to echo your words because, as you know, it's been quite a concern for us for a long, long time about the care plans. So well done to the team. It's brilliant. Is there still some children that are not in the correct placement in some schools? And how quickly are we able to find a more suitable school for them? And are the schools receiving the promised regular contact with the council around the placement of children?
I think I've got three parts of that question then. So question is about placements of children and young people with education, health and care plans. A question about funding, I think I heard there, and also contact from the EAC service. I think placements is quite a challenging one in that ultimately there's a parental preference element to this. Parents may prefer their child to go to a mainstream school or a special school, and then particular types of schools within that. Certainly we do seem to have we've got 7 special schools across North Hants. We've also got in our mainstream schools around about 300 and so what we call unit or provision places. These are specialist places attached to schools. And so in terms of those children who have the most complex needs, who need a more specialist provision, I think we've got a generous offer, or relatively generous offer. But for every parent that might prefer their child to go to a mainstream school, another might prefer them to go to a special school, and there's a fine balance between meeting a parent's preference and also then managing the demand as to where we believe and know, and we make professional judgments about which school we might which type of school we might recommend. The other challenge around that is one of geography. So across the unitary authority, parents might prefer a school which is from the bottom left to the top right, or vice versa, and that then causes us challenges around funding and transport. I think what our intention is that we would like for families to feel confident for their children to go to their mainstream school, perhaps with a resource provision or a unit attached to that mainstream school, if they've got concerns about being able to manage that. And if the child needs a special school placement, we will find the most appropriate special school placement nearest to their home. And we're working towards that. We do have, of course, as you know, a number of children and young people who attend independent special schools, which are significantly more expensive. On average, they're about 2-3 times the cost of our state-funded special school for, by the way, no particularly better quality or better outcome, but that is a matter of volume that we're dealing with. And so, we have to think very carefully about whether we would support that. If a child's needs are so complex and unique that it wouldn't make sort of, if you like, economic sense for us to be able to make that provision in our own state-funded sector, then I think there's sometimes a call for that. But by and large, we want to be able to offer a local state-funded mainstream or special school or arrangement for the children. And I don't think we'll ever be able to meet all parents' preferences, but we can certainly move towards it. Just quickly, if I move on, funding. I think some of our mainstream school colleagues do let us know, some more vocally than others, that they don't believe they receive sufficient funding to be able to make the special educational provision that's in each child's plan. We have a banding framework which is long established. It probably does need a refresh, but the challenges there are, as we will all know here, the significant pressures there are on the high needs block of the dedicated schools grant. That's the money that the local authority holds on behalf of schools to make the special provision. Kevin and I are both actually working on work around that, and we've sort of gathering some evidence about what we think those band values should be. But I think broadly that's the right approach. Again, you know, banding is an approach that almost all local authorities take now. We want to strike a balance between obviously giving schools sufficient funding to be able to make that provision, but the flexibility then for schools to be able to tailor that provision, how they would deliver it in their school. That's the alchemy in this one. Contact, I think the last point there was we've just reorganized our education, health and care service to what we call a locality model, to be based in the 4 quadrants areas, if you like. East Northants, Corby, Kettering, Wellingborough. That's our sort of broad sort of footprint. And it's absolutely our intention by the way that we've organised the EHC service that every school will know their named caseworker or their SEND officer, that those staff have termly check-in meetings with each of their allocated schools, that they forecast the children and young people that are coming forward from SEND support, where schools support the children, to an education, health and care needs assessment or a plan. I guess the volume of contacts into the service is exceptionally high. So we have a duty system also to make sure that calls in, emails in are always monitored. It's sometimes a challenge to be able to get back to those in as timely a way as we would want to, but we strive to do that. Hope they were helpful answers for you.
Thank you, Troy. Can we have a copy of the slides, please?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I'll arrange for those to be sent. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, George. Just a quick question on that. The funding for the schools, is it a national formula or is it a local formula?
It's a local formula. I think all local authorities have been waiting on a promise by various governments now over the last 10 years for a national funding formula. I don't think it's ever going to come, frankly, because of the, you know, just such variation in demography, economics, locality, etc. Our funding formula is one which is approved through the schools forum relationship. The money that is reserved from the high needs block from the dedicated schools grant is one that's agreed with schools forum. I think compared with let's say some nearby local authorities, we might be a little bit light on some of our banding values, but we then face the same challenge as all local authorities do. There's no new money, and so we have to think about either reimagining how we carve that money up across the bands. And I think there's some opportunity to do that, or we have to think about the provision that's made for children and young people. And I think we've got probably good opportunities in both of those to support mainstream schools better through central services, but through also advice, training, resources, materials, etc., about how schools might make better best use of their banding funding, rather than thinking about old models, which we still see some schools using, which is, you know, the number of hours that a teaching assistant will sit alongside a child, whereas actually SEND support can be much more sophisticated and dynamic than that. So yeah, there's work to do on banding and the values and the budget this year for sure.
Thank you, Troy. Wendy, please.
Thank you, Troy. You've answered my question, and I was also going to ask for the slide. So I just wanted to say really that it's really good to see the trajectory of the completed EHCPs and the positive response from parents. So well done. Thank you.
That's very kind of you. Thank you, Councillor. And yeah, I think it's really, I'm very happy to take that feedback. It is very much owned by the EHC service manager and the team. They've done an exceptional piece of work, and they're very, very committed to this area of work. Thank you.
Charisse, please.
Yeah, I just wondered, Troy, if you could just speak a little bit about recruitment, because obviously there's been such a significant drive around bringing permanents in, and we've got a team of around 57, but we had a huge number of interims in the service. So could you update on some of that progress as well? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Charisse. And sorry, I should have jumped off straight on that one, didn't I? Because it's that has again been another really successful story. So we grew the size of the EHC service in the sort of middle and second and third quarters of last year, and it was absolutely right and necessary to do that because of the huge increase in demand and the volume of business. But what that did mean was that we had a large number of agency staff who are quite expensive, frankly, so they've been very good for us. But yeah, we've moved to recruit towards permanency, and we've been very successful. Really, really pleased actually with the quality of candidates that we've received: school staff, teachers, social workers, people that have worked in one type of public sector or another. Some new young staff. I've never quite felt so old as when I look at the EHC team and think, gosh, you're all so young. So we appointed around, I'm sorry, Sharice, I might get the numbers wrong, and I know Sharice is keen on these details, so let's see if she'll correct me, but around 14 permanent caseworkers and officers just before Christmas. In January, we recruited another 7 caseworkers. Sorry, that was before Christmas. Another 7 caseworkers started in January. I think we've got another 4 full-time posts to come on board. I think I'm nearly there with this, but we've also then got to get some key posts filled. For example, our resolutions officer, who's a hugely experienced, we're very lucky to have her, but agency colleague. We do need to go out to recruit for a permanent member of staff around resolutions, and that includes the work around tribunals. So our aim is by April to have reduced all of our agency staffing and be at a position of permanency. I think there might be 1 or 2 posts.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's,
one or
that's the
two
ambition,
posts.
isn't it? And the reason
Yeah.
why I know these details acutely is because they are related to our medium-term financial plan. So yeah, it will be fully permanent by the 1st of April 2025.
Thank you. Sorry, that was I'm glad you're here because I know you know that, Sharice.
I know.
No, and you're right, Sharice and Troy. That's a fantastic news story as well. But permanent staff, nothing against agency staff, but permanent staff, know the cases, know the children, know the families, day in, day out, don't they? And they have. I don't want to put agency staff down, but they have more of a vested interest, perhaps, in the area. Agency staff absolutely have done the job whilst we've done this, but it's absolutely the right way forward.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so that moves us to the close of meeting. So normally we do have the forward plan, don't we? Items for forward plans. So because of impending elections on May the 1st, that will then continue after May. So we will then start again with new or old councillors, whoever the public decide. It sounds like Big Brother there, doesn't it? But so thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening, and I will see you all soon.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, bye.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.